Hey guys, so believe it or not, we are starting our final mystery in our unit all about plants. And our question here is, how could you make the biggest fruit in the world? Hmm. All right, I want you to, when I say go, pause the video, think of an answer to this question. And when you have an answer, play the video. Okay? Pause and think in three, two, one, go. Okay, so if you have an answer, then continue following along. If not, hit pause again, get an answer in your head to this question: how could you make the biggest fruit in the world? And then hit play when you're ready. All right, let's start our exploration.
Hi, it's Doug. When I was 8 years old, my dad came home from work and presented me with a little packet of these. These are pumpkin seeds, he said. We're going to plant one of these seeds in our garden, you and me. But these weren't just any pumpkin seeds. My dad had grown ordinary pumpkins before. I'd seen them in his garden. Now, if you didn't know this, pumpkins grow on vines, like you see here. And like any plant, they need sunlight, and pumpkins need to be watered every day. So when we planted one of the seeds from the packet, we gave it water every day, just like we were supposed to. Soon we planted it in the garden. But the pumpkin from my dad's packet of seeds grew, and it grew, and it grew, eventually getting this big. This was getting crazy. I'd never seen a pumpkin like this. And I knew something about pumpkins. You see, I grew up in a town called Sycamore, Illinois. And in Sycamore, we're all a little bit crazy about pumpkins. Every year, the town has a pumpkin festival where we decorate and display pumpkins on our courthouse lawn.
I wonder if you've ever decorated a pumpkin before. I've done it a few times.
Our city flag even has a pumpkin on it.
Oh my goodness.
Dad, I said, we should take our giant pumpkin up to the courthouse. My dad got a big smile. You read my mind, he said. You see, that was my goal all along. I knew how big this pumpkin would grow. You did? I said. Yep. Remember the seeds I bought? He said. Those weren't just ordinary pumpkin seeds. They were a special variety of pumpkin called giant pumpkins.
Oh my goodness, look at those pumpkins.
Whoa. Wait, there are different kinds of pumpkins? I asked my dad. Oh, yeah, he explained. Just like there are different varieties of apples at a grocery store. Now, as it turned out, my dad had heard that there would be a giant pumpkin competition that year at the Sycamore Pumpkin Festival, and he thought we should give it a try. By the time it had finished growing, it was really so big that neither of us could possibly lift it up. I couldn't even fit my arms around it. We had to get some of my dad's
Oh
friends to
my
come
goodness.
over so that they could all lift it together and carefully load it in the back of a truck. We won that year. It weighed 200 pounds, the largest pumpkin in Sycamore for the year 1988. I was so proud. I even have a trophy from it, still to this day. How did there come to be such enormous, gigantic pumpkins in the first place? As you might guess by now, if you've learned about selection,
Hmm. I'm going to give you time to think. How on earth do you think pumpkins could be that big? Hmm. I know Doug said something about selection. Let's see what else he says.
it all started with an original, regular sized pumpkin. Using the process of selection, plant growers, people who grow plants, have over time created new varieties of pumpkins, some of which are bigger and bigger. My giant pumpkin at 200 pounds is not the largest pumpkin ever, not even close. In the time since I grew my giant pumpkin in 1988, these days you can buy seeds for a pumpkin variety that will grow to be 2,000 pounds.
Oh my
That's the
goodness.
same weight as a baby elephant. That means that giant pumpkins are now officially the largest fruit ever. This is the first time anyone has tried to make a fruit so gargantuan. But it's definitely not the first time that plant growers have tried to make fruits bigger in general. Size is actually one of the most common traits that plant growers use selection to try to improve. Like, here is one of my favorite examples of people changing plants. This is a painting from about 400 years ago. And can you tell what that is? You might not even recognize it.
Hmm.
But these,
What are those? I'm going to reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1, 0. If you want more time, hit pause, then hit play when you're ready.
are watermelons. Getting to see the old painting is almost like getting into a time machine and going back in time. It gives you a glimpse at what watermelons used to look like before we used selection to create the watermelons we grow today. Back 400 years ago, there wasn't as much of the watermelon that you could actually eat. Most of it was that white rind part, which doesn't taste very good. Watermelons today, you can eat all of the insides. It's so tasty. It's one of my favorite plants to eat.
Yeah, that's amazing. See how Doug was saying this right here is the white rind part, not where the fruit is in the watermelon that we like to eat. And there's so much fruit now. Look at all that red today. But in this painting, it was so small. There was a lot more of those white rind than there was of the red fruit. That's interesting.
What about other fruits and vegetables? What did these look like before selection? You might not recognize this little fruit. Maybe you think it's a cherry.
Mm. Oh, I remember what this was from last week.
Nope. This is the original wild version of a fruit you know well. Let's see what it looks like today, after we've done selection on it to make it bigger. It's a peach. So the original wild peaches used to be much smaller. Or here's a vegetable you know. I doubt you can
My
recognize it in its
goodness, what is
original
that?
wild form here. But let me show you what it looks like today, after
Wow.
we've done selection on it to make it bigger. It's corn. Isn't that crazy? Plant growers have created different varieties of almost every fruit and vegetable you'd see in a store. There really isn't a single plant that we grow which is anything like the original natural version of that plant. We've changed all of them through the process of selection. So, now just for fun, if you were to become a plant grower and you could use selection to create a giant variety of any plant, which one would you choose to make bigger?
Hmm. Okay, now it's your turn to think. So we saw an example of a gigantic pumpkin. But if you could choose any giant version of a fruit or a vegetable, which one would you do? All right, when I say go, I want you to pause this video. When you have an answer in mind, you can hit play to continue. All right, you're pausing the video in 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so now that you have your answer in mind, let's continue.
Selection doesn't just have to be for plants that we eat. We can use selection to change any plant to be something we want more. Consider plants we enjoy just for their beauty, like cut flowers, the kind you might buy for one of your parents on a special day. These are roses, one of the flowers most admired for their beauty. Now, in the wild, the original natural rose looks like this. So basic, it's so simple. Can you see what we've changed about the rose?
Wow.
Count the number of petals and you'll see what's so different. The wild natural rose only has 5 petals. But thanks to the process of selection, roses today look like this. They have dozens of petals. If you pick and count all the petals, there's as many as 45 petals on a modern rose. Now, how did plant growers do that? Well, the process of selection is possible because of two important facts. Take these pumpkins, for example. They all came from the same parent pumpkin. But no two individual babies of a parent have exactly the same traits. The only reason someone was ever able to make a variety of giant pumpkin was because no two pumpkin brothers and sisters are exactly the same. You can see here one of them's different. There's always at least one pumpkin that's slightly bigger than all its sibling pumpkins. And so that's how they were eventually able to make a giant pumpkin variety. And with our rose example, the same fact is true. Wild roses almost always have 5 petals, but occasionally there's a rose that has fewer than 5 petals, like a 4 petaled rose. And there's sometimes a rose born that has more than 5 petals, like a 6 petaled rose. So we can summarize this fact by saying no two individuals are exactly alike. There's always small differences. That's the first fact to remember about selection. The second fact is that babies usually get most of the traits of their parents. In science, we say that they inherit the traits of their parents. So, with that slightly bigger pumpkin, if you planted any of its seeds, most of the new pumpkins that grew from its seeds would also be slightly big, just like their parent pumpkin. These new pumpkins inherited their parents' larger size. Or with our rose example, if we go out and look for only those roses that have 6 petals instead of 5, and we make sure to create new rose seeds from just those 6 petaled parents, then the babies will tend to have 6 petals too. And now we can start the process all over again. See, because remember the first fact no two individual babies are exactly alike. Most of them will have 6 petals, but now some of them might grow up and have 7 petals. So that's where the idea of selection comes in. It's plant growers who carefully watch for little changes in traits, like number of rose petals, and then only select those roses whose traits they want. After years of doing this over and over, rose growers have managed to get roses that had 8 petals, and then 9 petals, and then 10 petals, and so on, eventually reaching the 45 petaled roses of today that are sold in flower shops. You can really see how, using the process of selection, we've managed to change natural wild plants into the new varieties of bigger, better plants that we use for food and beauty. There's really not a single natural plant in our stores. All of them have been changed by the process of selection, where we've made them bigger, or tastier, or more beautiful. We can use selection to improve any trait that a plant has. So now stop and think for a moment. If selection can be used to improve any trait of a plant, not just its size, what's a trait you might change about your favorite fruit?
All right. So, this is the perfect place to stop for today because with today's science lesson, we had a seesaw link. That seesaw activity is going to have you answer this question. So, you are going to take your favorite fruit or vegetable, either one, and decide what trait would you want to select for. Size, shape, color, flavor, so on, right? So let's take pumpkins for an example. Maybe I could say, oh, I would want pumpkins that are bright yellow. All right, so that's pumpkins. And the trait that I want to select for is color of pumpkins. All right, you have the chance to do the same. So you can exit out of this video and go to the seesaw activity on Google Classroom. All right, get to work, scientists.